Well, good evening and welcome to our program tonight. I'm John Jacob, the president of the Mount Holly Historical Society. And tonight we have Erin Hines. When I first met her, she wasn't Erin Hines. And we met in a very interesting location, the top of Spencer Mountain. She was working for Gaston County and was going to be doing a program at Poston Park, which is right at the foot of Spencer Mountain. And she wrote my boss and said she wanted to have access to the top of the mountain to get some pictures for the program. He wasn't about to do anything with it, so he just sent me a copy of her note and said, handle it. So I contacted her and made an appointment, and that's where we met. And then years went by, and all of a sudden I get an email from Alan Pizza, who's the director of the Gaston County Museum in Dallas, asking me if I'd be interested in working on a task force that was involved with the thread trail that's going to go to the top of Spencer Mountain. That they were trying to design meaningful signage for the whole trail. And I said, sure, but where did you get my name? And Allie said, oh, Erin suggested it. Well, the only Erin that I saw on any of the correspondence was Erin Hines, and I'm scratching my head. Who the heck is Erin Hines? And finally it dawned on me, I bet she got married. And so we've gotten back together again in many meetings, and she'll be discussing a lot more of the details and things that we have learned about Spencer Mountain, and there's a great deal. She's got some qualifications that make her very good for this program. She's got her master's degree from Montreat College, and that's a master's of science in environmental education, and a bachelor from state in science and natural resources. So I think she's well qualified to speak for us tonight. So please welcome my friend Erin.
Thank you so much, John. Can everybody hear me pretty well? Okay, awesome. I feel like I think the speaker is picking me up just if I leave it just like that. So it's good to be here with you tonight. I'm going to start off with a little bit of how I got interested in Spencer Mountain, and then I'll get into what we've learned on the task force about the history. But Spencer Mountain has always been a source of fascination for me. I grew up outside of Raleigh because my dad worked at NC State, but my grandparents were here in Gaston County. If you've ever been out to Weinberger's Farm, that was my grandparents who run that. And so we grew up coming here all the time in the summers and weekends to help out on the farm. And every time we were driving from 85 back to the farm, we would drive past Spencer Mountain. So when I was little, I would see the mountain and I would be like, oh, we're almost at the farm. So I would always notice how it just kind of stands out from the landscape. Like there's, no other mountains around it, which was always really interesting to me. So I always wondered about it, like how did it form? And I'm also old enough to remember the mill when it was still there in Spencer Mountain. Mainly after it was closed, but it was still standing for a while before they tore it down. I remember there was this like white mansion, some of you may remember that in Spencer Mountain, which has also been torn down now, but I remember wondering about that giant house that nobody lived in. And then about 8 years ago, I settled in Gaston County full time. My brother took over the farm, married my husband, and a job opened up here in Gaston County for environmental education. And at the time I was working in Cabarrus County doing environmental education. So I was like, well, let me come back to Gaston County, come back to my roots. So as an environmental educator for Gaston County, one of the things I like to do is really connect the science that I'm teaching to local places. I really think that education is supposed to create good citizens and responsible community members. So I think students need to understand how what they're learning in the classroom connects to their community. So how I circled back to Spencer Mountain is I was designing this program for 4th graders, and it was about geology. And I was like, well, Gaston County has some interesting geology. Like, we have this mountain, and how did this get here? So I thought, I'm going to design a program where, we can talk about the rock cycle with Spencer Mountain. So I did. I contacted John, and I wanted to get some pictures. I wanted to go up to the top so they could see how high up it is compared to the surrounding land. I wanted to see what the rocks looked like so I could figure out how it formed. And the thing with Spencer Mountain that I've learned is that one question leads to another. So when we got up to the mountain, got up to the top, John just had all of this information about the broadcasting history, which he'll be sharing more with y'all about that later. And I was like, wow, this mountain actually has a really special place in our local history. And there was this giant pit up there, and he's like, oh yeah, there used to be a mine here. And I was like, oh, I wonder, what they were mining. And then there was like a railroad bed, and I was like, oh, I wonder how that got there. So I just had this rabbit hole of local history with Spencer Mountain, where I was really just kind of following these questions because I knew the kids would ask me. So I was like, I need to know, because they're going to say, what is this? Why is this here? So that kind of got me started on this path of discovery. And then this evening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the story that we have pieced together about this mountain. I'm going to leave the details of broadcasting to John, but everything else I'll cover. And I say we because, like John mentioned, there is a trail project going on now to the top of the mountain. And we are on a task force that is kind of assembling this information so that we can put these educational signage along the trail. And so the history that I'm presenting today is really because of the work of the task force and the consultant group that we were able to hire to work with us. So I'll give a full update on that project at the end. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention on that. Okay. So I think we can just go ahead and get started with the history. And I'm actually going to start with the words of one of our task force members. This is Cassidy Plyler. She is a Catawba tribal member. And I just think she articulated really clearly why we're doing our project and our purpose. So I'm going to see if I can get this to play.
The history is still there, that there was once many uses for this place, and that those stories are just waiting to be heard, and that if we don't do that research and we don't deep dive into it, it gets lost and gets forgotten, and that's not something we want. We want these places to be remembered. The significance of these places and the people that were there, they have stories too. It's not just about the mountain itself. It's about what types of stories did these people in this area share? What does the story of the mountain mean to not just you, but to those surrounding in the areas traditionally and even today?
All right. Also, a disclaimer on the pictures that are going to be in this. We are not yet at the point where we've really nailed down the exact pictures we're going to use on the signage and got our high quality photos together and photo permissions. So these are just unofficial, like I copied them off the internet pictures. But on the signs, we're going to have copyrights and all that for really good historical photos that we have in our archives. Okay, so first, something you should know about environmental educators is that when you ask us to talk about history, you have to understand we might think about history a little bit differently than most people do. So history to me includes not just human history, but environmental history, which we're really connected to. So I like to think about things in terms of geologic time scale. I think it really keeps things in perspective. So just to explain what you're looking at here, this is geologic time scale. So this timeline shows 4.6 billion years, so the age of the Earth. And so we're thinking about the formation of Spencer Mountain. That happened 500 million years ago. So that's, let's see, do we have a pointer? Maybe not.
Just use the mouse.
Okay, let's see if you can see the mouse of it. Oh, you can, excellent. Okay, so 500 million years ago is actually all the way up here. We're thinking about the history of the Earth. So, it's still old, but if we're thinking about the history of the Earth, it's kind of new. So we have Spencer Mountain, the formation kind of starting 500 million years ago. Gaston County at that time, 500 million years ago, would have been on the shores of a shallow sea. So if we just take this block and we blow it up, that's what this part of the chart is showing. So this is just these top three in this era blown up over here. So Gaston County would have been on the shores of the shallow sea, and the reason why this matters is because on the shores of the sea you have a lot of sand. Sand is made of quartz. Quartz is very, very hard. That's why sand is kind of coarse and gritty. So clay usually has other minerals in it that get smaller, but sand is hard, gritty, really difficult to weather. So, there we go. All right. So as that sand layered over on top of each other over time, it compressed and formed sandstone that had a lot of quartz in it. All of this matters because Spencer Mountain formed in a very different way compared to other mountains, which is why it's just there by itself without a lot of other mountains around. But 220 million years ago, which is fast forwarding up here, that is when we had Pangea. Okay, so when we think about Pangea, it seems like something that happened a really long time ago, but again, we're like all the way up here now. So Pangea split apart, and in that time, you started to have a lot of erosion and weathering. And so that sandstone turned into metamorphic rock, quartzite. Because it was made out of quartz, again, it was very, very, very hard. So at the time that Pangea split apart, Spencer Mountain was basically just a big quartz rock underground, surrounded by softer rock. So it wouldn't have looked like a mountain. It's just underground. But over time, as that begins to erode, then you start to expose that harder rock. So because Spencer Mountain exists today, because it's so much harder than the rocks around it. That's why it sticks up. So most mountains are going to form whenever plates push together and they push up. But for Spencer Mountain, it's because of what it's made of. It's because it's made of this hard quartzite core. So everything else around it broke down and just left this mountain. That formation is called a monadnock, which is an American Indian word that means lonely or isolated mountain, and they're pretty rare. So we have Spencer Mountain. Crowders is formed in the same way, so they're part of that same like quartzite band. Pilot Mountain is another example of a monadnock. That's about it in our whole state. So they're not super common, so it's actually really unique that Gaston County has this monadnock here. All right. So that's had to give y'all a little bit of environmental history there. Sorry, I have to figure out this mouse. Because now it's on that screen, but it's not on my screen. It's like a split screen. Okay, here we go. All right. So let's put the geologic history into perspective. So the earliest humans didn't appear until 300,000 years ago. So that's going to be up here in this yellow line. So if you take that yellow band at the very top of our chart and you follow it over here, just do the mouse again if I can find it. Or not. Okay, here we go. So this yellow band right here, if it was this big, all of human history would fit into this tiny yellow band. That's all the way at the top. So just a little perspective, we haven't been around all that long. We're kind of babies. So coming to North Carolina, humans appeared here. Estimates put that around 10,000 years ago. So we're going to zoom into that time frame and obviously really focus on human history with our talk here. So in this area, ancestors of the present-day Catawba Nation settled here on the banks of the river around 6,000 years ago. And they call themselves Yeiswa, which is something that Cassidy was going to talk a little bit more about. But Catawba is a name that they were actually given. Yeiswa is the name for what they call themselves in their own language, and it means people of the river. So this is how their script is written. in for that Yeiswa. So I was going to go back to Cassidy. She talks a little bit about Catawba history specifically and what they use the river for. So one of the things that she talks about is Catawba clay, Catawba pottery. If you know anything about the Catawba people, they do have a specific way of making that pottery, and that's because of our clay that we have here. That was a really important natural resource for them. So she talks about that.
Oh, okay. So of course, the river's named after us. But the main use of it was pottery. If it wasn't for the river, we wouldn't have our mineral-rich deposits that provide our clay, which has been used from trade to, at first it was utilitarian, so we used it to cook. We had to survive, so that was our main key there. And then eventually it went into trade to where it was our source for money up until it was, one of the only sources of money when we couldn't find jobs and things until we were able to work into the mills and such after people of color were able to work in the town of Rock Hill, third shift. Colored people were able to work in the mills there. So we actually call ourselves the people of the river. So Iswam is river in Catawba, and we refer to ourselves as Yea Iswam, which means the people of the river. So Catawba was not a name that we called ourselves. It was a name given to us, just like how it was the name taken from us, given to the river as well. So in that area, there were, of course, trade camps, so the Catawba, we often think that our native tribes were just stuck in the same place they are today, but that's not the case, right? So the Catawba had village networks and these multi-networks that were connected through diplomacy, leadership, language, culture. And one of those places was up near Spencer Mountain, right? There was a huge thriving settlement that was Catawba. It was key in trade and just supplying, at some point, protection to some of the people that settled in those areas, but also it was able to bring things further down the river for the people in the villages here. Maybe they had a higher influx of animals that they were able to hunt at this time, so then they're able to bring trade down to these smaller villages along the riverways. That is something that we're in the process of trying to reawaken and rediscover within our own tribe. So we have researchers that have been deep diving into that specific area and figuring out what these names would have been and what we would call them. Because today, of course, we all speak English, and within our own community, that's what we know them as. We know it as Spencer Mountain. But through research, we are trying to find those historical significant names that would have been significant to our people at one time. Just that, that area of the river there it's key in what was trade and what we are today, and knowing the Catawba River and seeing its uses, because in that area of the river, it's wider, it's deeper than if you come here. You're not going to be able to have the same means of transportation down here in this part of the river as you do up there in the upper part, or what we call the south fork of the river, but it is still upper than this part in the reservation. And so the uses that it has, those stories are important in telling what the river actually means to people. It's not just, oh, the river was this to the indigenous people. The river means so much to not just to us traditionally, but to everyone around it. And these stories and these opportunities help share that. When I said the river means more than just clay, yeah, the river supplied our pottery, but it was our lifestyle. It was our livelihood. You had to use the water to eat, right? So it's provided food. It provided transportation for how am I going to get from here to there? How am I going to bring, especially when people started to settle, right? So we, especially in the Charleston area, we traveled the river all the way down to Charleston to trade with these people because we knew that's what they wanted and they needed. And if we wanted anything different, we're going to have to interact within the trade. But also, the river, it was utilized. There was for crossing, right? There was these fords where people could easily just cross over, where you wouldn't have to build a bridge. You could just walk by foot across these rivers. They offered supplies. It also was a place for sacredness, for medicine. For Catawba, we believed that the river was a place that you could go to and with your sicknesses and your ailments and all your cares and everything that you had, and you immersed yourself in these waters and it would wash that away with you. And that was the belief, and even until, when the smallpox epidemic was coming through, that they'd find tons of Catawba that had just perished down there in the river because they were trying to get that sickness to wash away. Even today, a lot of our people still go to the river, if not for fishing, but canoeing, but just finding peace. That's one of my places to go to, because you can feel that washing it away with you. And that's what the river is. It's not just this, oh well, it supplied clay, it did this and this. It's a living thing, and it is more than just one meaning. It has multiple purposes.
But it's believed that at its peak, Catawba territory stretched from the Piedmont of South Carolina all the way into the Piedmont of Virginia. So all across our Piedmont would have been Catawba. We know that there's a Catawba village site here in Gaston County that dates back to about 1,200 years. It's located along the South Fork River right at the base of Spencer Mountain. And the Catawba who lived here would have been very careful stewards of the land. So if you're imagining like Gaston County pre-Europeans, you might be thinking of like giant trees. That's what I thought of, like huge trees, big oak forests. But you may be surprised to learn that actually this ecosystem would have been a Piedmont prairie. So we actually had bison here in Gaston County, and this was managed by the Catawba with fire. So they would actually have low intensity fires that they burned the landscape with, and this was to support the bison as a food source, as well as to make travel easier, pest control easier, that kind of thing. Early estimates put their population between 15,000 and 25,000 people. So this was a very large tribe. And that was when European settlers first arrived. That's the estimate there. Their first recorded contact would have been with DeSoto in 1540. So this is just showing DeSoto's route. And up here is when he would have been interacting with the Catawba. By the late 1600s, Catawba villages were kind of major trade hubs between Virginia colonies and South Carolina colonies. So they were a trade route between those European colonies. The nation generally carried a very strategic philosophy of peace towards European settlers, but there was a lot of trade abuses going on. A lot of American Indians being kidnapped into slavery. And so in 1716, they did join with some other tribes to participate in the Yamasee War against the South Carolina colonies. South Carolina won that, of course, and following the war, the Catawba Nation actually was the predominant nation to absorb refugees from other tribes. So they actually took in a lot of other local tribes. So the Catawba people today are really have ancestry from a lot of different tribes in the area. So their populations were helped by the influx of refugees, but ultimately their population took very sharp declines, of course because of smallpox. So they had 4 waves of smallpox during the 1700s. By 1728, if you remember I said the population was like 25,000 at the upper estimates when Europeans came. By 1728, the population was reduced to around 1,400 people. So you can imagine the amount of history and knowledge that was lost in that time period due to just terrible losses with smallpox. By 1759, so that is just about 30 years later, their population was less than 500 people. At that point, they gathered together and established a town in South Carolina, which is located right there, was where they established that town in 1759. By the 1800s, their numbers would drop as low as like below 100 members. So at that point, colonists kind of considered them dissolved, which means that they didn't really target them for the same type of pushing that the Cherokee experienced, where the Cherokee had the Trail of Tears and all of that. They kind of just left the Catawba there because they were like, oh, there's like not a lot of people there. So that a little bit worked in the Catawba's favor, which means that today they are on their ancestral lands, which not a lot of American Indians still are on their ancestral lands, but Catawba are. So they are now have a very growing culture. So they have their reservation in South Carolina on some of their ancestral lands. Obviously, they do not have, a reservation that covers all of their ancestral lands, but they have a growing population of about 3,000 people. This is Cassidy from our task force. So they have some really cool events down there. It's not far. It's just, one county over in South Carolina, but they have a festival in November. I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's called the Yeesaw Festival. But yeah, lots of really cool events down at their cultural center and that kind of thing. All right, so thinking to European settlement. So we're here now. So the earliest European settler that we think settled in present-day Gaston County was Peter Hoyle. He was a German. He settled along the South Fork in 1744, probably a log cabin that he constructed. Spencer Mountain was actually called Hoyle's Mountain before it was called Spencer Mountain. He didn't live on Spencer Mountain, but he was the closest settler, and they called it Hoyle's Mountain. The Catawba, of course, probably had a name for Spencer Mountain before that, but we have not been able to find a record of that. So we've been researching that, but have not been able to find a record of what that would have been. So this house pictured, if any of you are familiar with the area, you may recognize it. It's on Dallas Stanley Highway. Really close to our farm, actually, but this is considered the Hoyle Homestead. I think they thought it was the original homestead, but now my understanding is they did some archaeological research and figured out that the house was probably built by Peter Hoyle's grandson and then remodeled in the 1800s. So the features of the house are more in line with that time period, but it's near where his original settlement would have been. So the first European ownership of Spencer Mountain is recorded as a land grant to James Wyatt Sr. in 1767. He didn't live in Gaston County, he just got the land grant for the land. And just 5 years later, he sold it in 1772 to Zachariah Spencer, who moved south from Maryland, and he was the first family that actually owned and settled at the base of the mountain in terms of European families. So in terms of the map, this is Spencer Mountain. This is the South Fork River here. So Zachariah Spencer's homestead would have been here, and his gravesite is still there and marked today. Let's see. And we believe that Zachariah Spencer and his descendants owned that property until 1874. And at that point, they sold it to J. Harvey Wilson II from Mecklenburg County, who was into textile mills. And he purchased the land around Spencer Mountain and built the first large textile mill in the mountain. And he built it right there. So that is a part of the river that was at the time known as Hoffman Shoals. Of course, it's the location where the mill eventually was built, the modern day mill. And from some research, I am pretty sure that one of Zachariah Spencer's daughters or granddaughters married into the Hoffman family of the Hoffman Hotel in Dallas, and that they already had built a rudimentary mill here at that location, Hoffman Shoals. So probably when Wilson purchased the land, he was likely just improving that existing infrastructure that was already there. They put in that dam. That's why the river is shaped the way it is in that spot, because it actually got dammed. And this was noted as the 5th mill. At the time that J. Harvey Wilson expanded it, it was the 5th mill to come in Gaston County. So this is an image of it. So I'm assuming this is the original, based on the caption, which y'all can't read, but it could also be a later expansion. But it was a water-powered cotton mill, 2 stories high. It was constructed from locally made brick and from lumber that was just cut right there at the riverbank. The initial equipment consisted of 2,000 to 2,500 spindles, so it was a pretty good size for the area. It produced low-count cotton yarn, had about 40 to 50 workers. Again, they built that stone dam, which you can see in the picture. It's like right there. So that provided the power for the mill. And the mill grew and operated as Wilson and Moore Factory for about 20 years at that point. And then in 1895, Thomas Love and John C. Rankin purchased the mill and changed its name to Spencer Mountain Mill. So that was in 1895. And that became a corporation. The town of Spencer Mountain was incorporated at that time as a part of that mill. And it would actually lose the charter. The town would lose the charter as a town and then regain it later and then lose it again. So it's kind of gone back and forth over the years as to whether or not it's been an official town. Let's see. At the time that they changed the name to Spencer Mountain Mill, they increased the spindles to 7,500 spindles. So really a lot of growth at that time. And wagons would run daily to and from this factory. They would haul package yarn to the nearest shipping point, which was probably in Ranlo, to the rail line there. And they also used horse and wagon to take yarn out to closer customers as well. Spencer Mountain's iconic white mansion that I mentioned. This is a picture of it before it was torn down. Obviously, a picture of it after it has fallen into disrepair. But this one was probably constructed around that time of when Spencer Mountain became Spencer Mountain Mill, so around 1895, early 1900s. It was known as the Old Love House, which is one of the owners who bought the mill in 1895. It may have been originally constructed for Thomas Love and his wife, but the story goes from old-timers who lived right in that area that she didn't want to live out in Spencer Mountain. They had a house in Ranlo, and she felt like Spencer Mountain was like out in the boonies, and she didn't want to live out there. So they were giving it to their adult son who was about to get married. And then his fiance died before they got married, and so he never moved in. And the house was just used as a community and event center after that. So that was what we've been able to figure out about this house. And a lot of ghost stories and things kind of came up around this house as well, probably related to his fiance dying. But she did not ever live in the house. She didn't die in the house. So we did a little research on that. 10 years later, in 1905, Spencer Mountain Mills was again at the tech forefront. They activated a water-powered generator. This is a picture of that generator. It's a hydroelectric dam. It's designed by Thomas Edison that was built here in 1905. And this was actually the way that Gastonia got electricity for the first time, was through this little hydroelectric dam in Spencer Mountain. So in 1906 was the first time electric lights came on in Gaston County, and it was from Spencer Mountain. In 1913, the mountain itself, not the mill or the mill village, just the mountain, was sold to the Spencer Mountain Stone and Brick Company, and that is when the mining operation started. This is an old aerial photo from 1938. It's the oldest aerial photo that we have. Of course, we didn't go up in planes and take pictures before that. But you can see, this one has the best, honestly, picture of the mine. So that is basically, it just looks like somebody just took a little scoop out of the top. So that was the Spencer Mountain Stone and Brick Company mine that was started in 1913. They actually mined mostly there, but a little bit further down the mountain down there as well. So this was the first and only instance of major mining activity. There are rumors that there was a lead mine on the mountain as well that was used during the Civil War, but that we can't find it, don't know if it was there or not. It's just kind of a rumor that was recorded. Let's see, so the charter for the mining company authorized the company to specifically quarry, crush, manufacture, and sell stone and brick. So then they used gravity to move the stone downslope about 138 feet to railroad cars. So that's that railroad that I had seen at the base of the mountain. It was constructed for the mine to be able to haul the rock out. And it was specifically stone that they were mining. So it wasn't, spodumene, which is like a lithium, or some of these other mines in our area were for other things. But for Spencer Mountain, it was the rock that they were taking. So this is an image that shows the little stub railroad line that goes out to Spencer Mountain, past Rainlow Mills. So prior to the mining operation, that didn't exist. It was put in place for the mining company. The Piedmont Traction Company filed a petition with Gaston County Superior Court that requested the right to construct that railway line. And based on some records at the time, it seemed like there was local opposition to that. So I think there was local opposition to the mine at the time and to the railroad line. People didn't want the railroad going through their property. So the petition kind of framed the railway as like, this is public transportation, which is kind of laughable because nobody lived there. So and it's just a stub road. So it was for the mine. It wasn't for public transportation, which is what people argued in court. But ultimately, they sided with the company, and so they put the railroad in. They began mining in 1914. At full capacity, stone crushers produced about 20 rail cars of crushed rock a day. So that's how much was being pulled out. But they only operated at this capacity for less than a month before there was a catastrophic fire that burned everything up. The structure, the machinery, everything. They said, the record says that it was caused by an electrical switch explosion. But the operation never fully recovered, and the company just dissolved a year later. So it was a very brief span of mining at Spencer Mountain, and I think it's interesting. There was a lot of local opposition, and suddenly a month after it starts, everything burns down. I don't know. Mystery of history. So, in contrast to the failed mining operation, the textile mills were pretty much booming at this time. 7,000 spindles, 148 employees, and by all accounts, life in the town was very picturesque. There was a church, a 2-room schoolhouse, a general store that was owned by the mill company. There was a community well in the center of town, which is how they got their water in addition to the river. There was an ice house, and rivers were a lot colder then, so they would actually cut chunks of ice out of the South Fork during the winter and store it in the ice house, which I was interested by because I just can't imagine the South Fork freezing over completely. And then I visited this man who, his name is James McGee, and he grew up in Spencer Mountain, and he had pictures of the town standing out on the river, when it was frozen completely over. So I was really fascinated by that, and I'm hoping that we get permission to use some of the photos that he has on the signage. There's also an island that's still there that was in the center of the South Fork in that area that was kind of created by the damming process. So at the time, they would actually take picnics and do outings there. There was a white bridge built over to the island. They had tennis courts, tables. I haven't found pictures of any of this, but this is in their local newspapers. They're talking about events that are happening out on the island. So that was in the 20s. And then in 1926, a forerunner of Duke Energy, so Duke Energy before it was Duke Energy had a couple of other names. So the Wateree Power Company, which was what it was called at the time in the 20s, they bought Spencer Mountain and the mill in 1926. And the reason was because of the hydroelectric dam there. So they were buying up things that could produce power. So at that point, the mill continued in operation, but it started to decline because it wasn't the main focus of the Wateree Power Company. They really just cared about the hydroelectric dam. In the early 1940s, during World War II, a firing range was constructed at Spencer Mountain, and my grandfather told me about this one. So we did some digging, and were able to actually find pictures of it. So the mountain was basically seen as a safe place to practice target practice. And the Morris Field, which I think is where the Charlotte airport is now, they would come out and practice short and long range rifle shooting against Spencer Mountain as the backdrop. And so there are still these trenches, concrete trenches out at Spencer Mountain. The trail will go by some of them. And that was where they would have folks down in the trenches raising up the targets, which is what you see. Those targets are a lot farther away than they look in that picture. And then they built a shooting mound, which is also, the trail will go right by that. So you can kind of see where they would crouch behind the shooting mound, and now it's all trees, but it would have been cleared. And they would have shot towards the mountain and shot towards these targets. And they had these competitions to see which company had the best target practice. So there was an article, the 459th Signal Battalion was an African-American military unit, and they won the highest award for the best small arms firing practice at Spencer Mountain in Gastonia. So there was a newspaper article about that, which was pretty cool. They didn't have pictures though, unfortunately, but we got this one. And this up here, the white on the mountain, that's probably scarring from the mining at the time. That was still visible. Then in 1946, the Watery Power Company was known as Duke Power. At that time, they sold the mountain to the Southeastern Broadcasting Company, which became WBTV, right? Okay, so that marked the beginning of the mountain's broadcasting history, which, again, I will leave the telling of that aspect of the story to John for a future talk. But that happened in 1946, so at that point, it was owned by WBTV. In 1957, Far Yarns, which is based in McAdenville, purchased the mill, the plant, and the 450 acres of the town. So they purchased that from the broadcasting company and basically got the mill back into a textile company. And at that point, they renovated the town. So this pond that's in Spencer Mountain that you can still see, it was just a stream. It was a spring, and the local boys would dam it up and swim in it and fish in it, but it wasn't there all the time. Until 1957, and they went ahead and built a dam and had it as a beautification project. So Far Yarns, the purpose was aesthetics, swimming, and fishing. It was basically here you go, to the town people. The mill itself was renovated and modernized, and it became one of the most successful carpet yarn producers in the U.S. So it bumped way up in production at this time. At this time is also when the South Fork started to earn the name the Rainbow River. I don't know if I remember, again, my grandpa telling me about this, but they would say that whatever color that they were dyeing the yarn that day, that's the color that the river ran, because this was pre-Clean Water Act, so there was not regulations about that kind of thing. So it earned the name Rainbow River. But with the revitalization of the town and the mill, kind of new life came to the area, and it continued on as this neat rural village for about 40 more years before textiles started to leave our area. So then in 1999, that was when Far Yarn decided to close the Spencer Mountain plant. So at that point, the mill had been going for 124 years. But they closed it down at that point. They consolidated apparel and hosiery yarn production into the Crescent plant that they had in Belmont, which followed the greater trend of textiles in our area. And they tore the mill down 6 years later. And at that point, the town just kind of slowly became abandoned. So I, remember it being a town when I was little, but mostly I remember kind of it being torn down. And now, if someone isn't from Gaston County and they drive through there, they would not even know that it was a town unless you tell them. It is just grown up and everything. In 2009, it says there were 29 registered voters left and just one business, the Spencer Mountain Grocery. And the abandoned homes were donated to the local fire department, and they used it for training. So they would burn the homes as a training procedure for firefighters. And by 2012, the only remaining buildings were a church, a closed gas station, and this mansion, which developed a reputation, like I said, as a haunted house. So people started to travel, honestly, from all over the southeast to see this house. Like ghost hunters would come out to it. So I think it was a safety issue for Far Yarns with that, with people just kind of going in there without permission. So they did tear that down, I think in 2015. I didn't write down the date on that, but somewhere between 2012 and 2015. So in 2015, the town of Spencer Mountain was still incorporated, but there were only 2 residents in the whole town. So that was the preacher and his wife, who lived beside the church here. And Our State magazine wrote a whole article about them. He was the mayor, and she was the councilwoman, and that was the town. But in 2016, they did officially suspend the town's charter. So the charter is currently suspended. It's not like gone. It'll come up for reevaluation every few years. And okay, I have it here. The gas station and the mansion were actually torn down in 2018. So now it's just, in terms of buildings that are in town limits, it's the church and the rectory, or whatever you would call it. But today we are entering a new chapter in the story of Spencer Mountain, and this chapter is all about conserving the natural beauty of the area, preserving our local history, making it accessible to the people of Gaston County, to the visitors here. We don't want this rich history and this beautiful pocket of our county to be forgotten, because there's a lot here, as I've covered. A lot has gone down on this little mountain. So to date, the Catawba Lands Conservancy has conserved 1,210 acres of land that is permanently protected. And the reason for it is because even with all this human activity that has happened, the ecology of Spencer Mountain is actually really diverse and really unique. So there are some ecosystems that are here on Spencer Mountain that you can't really find in other areas. And that's because of the unique topography of it. I kind of explained at the very beginning how it was formed and how it was formed in a unique way, and so that gave rise to a lot of unique ecosystems. So some of the things that we have here are like the big leaf magnolia. So this is a tree that, if you haven't ever seen these or heard of it, has the largest leaf in North America. So the leaves can get 3 feet long. And it also has the largest bloom of any plant in North America. This flower in this picture is about this big. So they have these huge flowers that bloom. And with the topography of the mountain and the river right there, you have these really steep ravines. And with those giant leaves, they do not like wind. So they like these little protected areas. And that's why we have big leaf magnolia here, and you can't really find them anywhere else. So they're found at a few places in the southeast, but they are a threatened species now in North Carolina. So we have them kind of not all over Spencer Mountain, but in the ravine areas of Spencer Mountain. We also have an endangered sunflower. This is the Swinetsis sunflower. I mentioned how this used to be a prairie ecosystem. Well, now we don't have a lot of prairie left, but the places where we still have it are places that are kind of left unmanaged other than the periodic mowing. So think under power lines and along roadsides. We have remnants of these species that were there. And the Swinetsis sunflower is one of those. So there is power lines that run up and down Spencer Mountain, and there is basically prairie underneath the power lines, what would have been prairie. And the other thing we have is sort of mountain ecosystems here in Gaston County, even though we're not in the mountains. So these are mountain laurels, we have galax, we have dog hobble, which if you're a plant nerd, you might know what that is. If you aren't, you probably don't. It's not a hugely significant species, but it is only found in the mountains except for here. So we have these plant communities that are just like mountain species. Spencer Mountain has a whole grove of beautiful mountain laurel that bloom on there. And so that is really unique as well. And eastern hemlock too, we have some of that, just a few. So a lot of these really rich ecology on this mountain, which is what helps us get grant funding to be able to preserve this land. So for a long time, the Catawba Lands Conservancy wanted to purchase the mountain itself directly from WBTV in order to permanently protect it, because their model is basically they get conservation easements, which are a permanent way to protect land. It can never be developed. The development rights are held in trust forever. So that's what they wanted to do to the mountain. We aren't quite there yet. WBTV didn't agree to sell the whole mountain to the Catawba Lands Conservancy. Basically what they agreed to is a 20-year recreational easement. I think of it as like a test drive. They're like, yeah, we give you permission to do recreation on the mountain and to protect it for recreation and to construct trails on it. So, and that lease runs out in 20 years. So they're going to see how it goes because they still have their broadcasting equipment at the top. So they're a little bit concerned. But the thing is they were having a lot of trespassing up there. So the argument is that having this be an official place that people can come and visit, where Gaston County park staff are, managing, that they will actually have less damage to their equipment than when it was this mountain that nobody was allowed onto and everybody went up there, right? So that is kind of the partnership that we're working under now, is this recreational easement. I am confident, honestly, that they will extend that recreational easement because I am so excited about this project. I think it's going to be beloved. I think they're going to be excited about it whenever they see how awesome it is. So I'll give y'all a little update on what they're doing. So this is the proposed trails on Spencer Mountain. So you have a base loop, and then you have a summit trail. So you'll notice that there's a lot of switchbacks. It's graded very nicely. It's graded to allow for adaptive equipment so that people can get up there in like off-road wheelchairs and electrical bikes and adaptive bikes and things like that. So it should be very, very accessible. We have broken ground on it. So in terms of what is constructed now, the technical start of the trail, although it's connecting to like a 100-mile planned trail that the Catawba Thread Trail is doing, but the Spencer Mountain Spur part goes from the river, which George Poston has this section right down by the river. So it connects from the river, and the trail from the river is constructed all the way up to the base of the mountain. So we have a trail to the base of the mountain, and they're waiting on a little bit of permitting with DEQ, the state of North Carolina, to be able to go up. All right, let's see. And in terms of the interpretive signage, so these are the partners that have been working together to put all this information together. So you'll see the Catawba Thread Trail, which is an initiative, kind of a sub-organization within the Catawba Lands Conservancy. Gaston County Department of Natural Resources, that's where I work. Gaston County Departments of Parks, Recs, and Tourism, Museum of Art and History, and Gaston County Library are all involved. So Gaston County is really in support of this project. The Catawba Nation, Laurel Hill Nature Preserve is a nature preserve that borders Spencer Mountain. So they are involved on our task force. The North Carolina Department of Commerce, this is actually a employee who works at Kings Mountain Visitor Center, but he knows a lot about the history of the area because of working at Kings Mountain. So he is on our task force as well. Belmont Abbey, we have a professor who is from the history department there who is on our task force, and then John retired from WBTV, so he has that fantastic history there as well. So the task force got together and they said, we want this to be more than just a trail. We don't just want people to, just walk the trail and enjoy nature. That's great, but we want this to be an educational experience. We want people who are interested to be able to learn about the local history, both people that are from here and also visitors that are coming in who don't really have a sense of our history here in Gaston or our sense of place. So we got together and decided we were going to apply to some grants that we could hire out a consultant to help us put this history together and help us plan out these signs. So we got a grant from America 250, and basically they funded the development of this research and a plan, which is very long, so I won't present it to you. It's like 60 pages. But it tells us exactly kind of how to prioritize the information. So they surveyed the community, and people are most interested in learning more about Catawba Nation history, about natural history, and I think it was early settlers were like the top 3 interest areas. So in terms of funding, those will be the signs that we prioritize first. But we have plans to, of course, educate about the whole history of the mountain. So this is a map. It's kind of blurry, and obviously it's small. But here's the river. Here is Upper Spencer Mountain Road. And so this is George Poston Park on that side, and then George Poston Park on this side, and then the mountain. So our interpretive signage will start down here at the river. There will be a sign about the Catawba Nation and how they use the river and their history. There is a trail, again, like I said, already constructed here. There is some beautiful big leaf magnolia that you can see along this trail, so we'll have a sign on that. Then it crosses the road, and a lot of this through the center of the park and all the ball fields is sidewalk. We eventually would like to be able to have like a walking timeline along that sidewalk. We don't have funding for that yet, but that is something that we hope to be able to install and kind of have it spaced out so you can see, like, if Spencer Mountain formed here, then this is when people came to North Carolina. This is when the Catawba were here, and this was their stewardship, and this is when the Europeans came here first, and kind of have this like laid out walking timeline. So that would happen on this sidewalk portion. And then along the base loop, we won't have signage on the summit trail just because people are going to be coming up and down and might not want to, I guess, create traffic with the signs, but we will have signs on the base loop talking about the history of the town, the conservation efforts. They'll have signage at the top. I don't think I included a picture, but there's going to be a pocket park at the top of the park that has like bouldering and hammock locations and bathrooms and just kind of a rest area and an overlook where you can look out and see Charlotte. So they'll have a sign that shows the skyline of what you're looking at. Like you can see Crowders and Kings from different directions on the mountain, and you can also see, of course, the Charlotte skyline. So we'll kind of have a sign up there identifying all of that. So really creating this whole interpretive experience if you are walking the trail. So this is Ashton, who works with Catawba Thread Trail. So me and him have been partnering to lead the task force. Ashton has already gotten $30,000, so we've funded the planning for the signs. Now we have to design and fabricate the signs, so he's got $30,000 towards that. Gaston County is matching $10,000, that'll be $40,000 from our Parks and Rec and Natural Resource Departments. So we're getting there. That sounds like a lot of money. $40,000 does not fund our whole plan. It funds some portion of it. We are currently getting quotes in from different sign companies to figure out exactly how many signs we can do with that. But a lot of it is the graphic design. So a lot of that initial funding is going to go towards like the color schemes and the graphic design of the sign. And then once we kind of have a uniform kind of look, it'll stretch a little bit further. So if any of you are in community organizations that donate to this kind of thing, please let us know, because we can have different groups fund a specific sign that might be important to them. So that's kind of how we're hoping to fund these individual signs. All right. I know that was a lot. Does anyone have questions or stories about Spencer Mountain or comments? Yes.
If there is an environmental, a nature access for fishing down there right at the base of Spencer Mountain, and it's always blocked off, why is that, and is it ever going to be open for fishing to the general public? Because there's a brown sign right there saying there's that it's an open access for the public, but it's never open.
She's talking about the
I think
river
the boat
access.
launch, the
Yeah.
kayak access, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's always closed.
that's managed by Catawba Lands Conservancy. And so I'm guessing they only open it for, cause like the water levels really change the safety of being able to use the river. And so I'm thinking they open it when their staff is there and they actually have events, yes.
Actually, if you go to their website, you can get a code for the gate.
Yeah, or you.
Oh.
I was gonna say, you
Go to
can
the
request
website.
Yeah.
and get a permit,
Nobody has to be there for that.
yeah.
And it'll take you down all the way.
Okay.
They
To
have
McAdenville.
at the boathouse in McAdenville with the water treatment class, you can also go there in person and they will give you the pass code.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So that must be in partnership with the Catawba River Keepers
Yes.
then? Okay.
I thought they didn't want fishing in that area, that they want boat access on.
Yeah, and when they originally got access, it kind of got a little bit trashy down there because people did have open access, so they had to get it out.
Gotcha.
It started
Okay.
getting a little bit littered.
Yeah. Fishing trash can be an issue, so. But yeah, you can get a permit, but yeah, it's not just open generally. Yeah. Did you have a question? Oh, yeah.
Okay, all my life I've heard rumors that it was in the back down where that mine was, that there was some kind of like shaft that was driven into the mountains for military purposes or storage purposes or something like that. And there was, at one time, the railroad went around the mountain to the mine, and that there was a loading dock
Yeah.
that was connected to this, whatever it was, cave or hole or storage area, that, any evidence of that?
Yeah, so obviously the railroad is there, it connects to a loading dock, there's ruins of the loading dock, so we will have the sign about mining history right there. And then the shaft that everybody is trying to figure out what the heck it is, that is what we finally figured out was the target trenches. So we had all sorts of thoughts. There were all rumors all over the place, like, oh, this is where they stored ammo, or this is, but it was actually a trench where they would, and we'll have, the trail will go by and we can see it, but people would be down in the trench and they would have these giant, those targets are actually like 6 feet tall. So that's why I say they look like they're really small, but they're actually just far away. They're like 6 feet tall. And so they would raise and lower these wooden targets out of this trench, and they would lower it down, and the men down there could look at the target and count up the points for like how close they got to the bullseye. Then they would raise it back up. So it was a target trench, which we did not guess. That wasn't on anyone's like, oh, I think this is what it is, and we had to find the pictures and schematics that helped us figure out that's what that was. Yeah, good question.
Back in the 70s, you talk about pollution. There was a pipe down from Smithfield Mountain. I think it's the mill up coming out of Ranlow.
Okay.
And different colors come out of it every time we paddled by there.
Oh my gosh, so you remember
This
that
was in the 70s.
in the 70s.
We paddled from Philadelphia Church all the way to McAdenville, kayak.
That's
and
cool.
kayak.
That's really cool.
But anyway,
So that's the Rainbow River.
that's where the rainbow is today.
Yeah.
It's-
I was just wondering if there's going to be multiple access points, or is it only going to be through Poston?
As far as to the top of the mountain, it's only going to be through Poston.
Okay.
But, so that trail being the overall trail network that it's hooking into is like 100 miles long.
Yeah.
So, along the South Fork River, you could get there technically from Lowell. Like, you could get there from the boathouse. You could walk from the
So
boathouse
it's going to be part of the thread trail?
to the top. Yeah, it's
Okay.
going to be part of the thread trail.
Yeah. That park is just really busy during like soccer season and baseball
Right, so you
season.
can park at one of those other, you could park down at the boathouse, or
Yeah.
they're gonna connect up, upstream too, and I don't know where that parking will end up to be. But yeah, there'll be multiple other parking,
Okay.
you'll just have a longer walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you allowed to hike up the mountain now?
Right now, you're not, because the trail is actively under construction. So they have machinery up there, so it is a safety issue. But they we're hoping to open in November of this year. So it's going to happen pretty quick. And you can hike to the base of the mountain because that part is done. But you'll kind of see where the trail stops, and it'll be pretty obvious. Yes.
Hey, I'm Katie Barnes. I'm here on behalf of CPR, which is Constructive Plant Rescue. We're a native plant rescue group. I hear now that you have already started on the trail. We are very interested in rescuing the natives and trying to relocate those to like proper areas around. Has there been any effort already to save some of the native plants?
For sure.
Are you interested in working with us?
For sure. The plan for the trail, Catawba Lands Conservancy worked with a trail company, and so they planned a route that does not impact any sensitive plants. However, there's always natives that you are going to have to, nothing rare, but there are natives that you could rescue on the trail. So I can put you in contact. Email me. I think we've exchanged emails before. I'm Erin Hines with Gaston County. Actually, my email's here.
I have a picture of it.
Okay, got a picture. Yeah. Email me. I'll put you in touch with Ashton. He is coordinating the actual trail construction part. So he can let you know if there's dates where y'all can go out and dig up some trees or things like that.
All right, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's very interesting about the different flowers and plants and that part of the natural, unique entities that are there.
Yeah.
All my life, I've heard that it's only one of two places in Gaston County that they have rattlesnakes. Okay,
So we haven't found any. I don't know if they're still there. I think there used to be rattlesnakes because the habitat's perfect. Like, it is very, like, if I was a rattlesnake, that's where I'd want to be. Like, it's perfect because they love, those rocky areas. And in Crowder's Mountain, I know they do still have them in a Boulder area of Crowder's Mountain. But it has been, like, probably 50 years since anyone has reported a rattlesnake, and we have not, despite going all over the mountain to do all these plans and surveys, haven't seen any. My guess is they're no longer there, because people do kill them when they see them. So I think they were extirpated from the mountain. Yeah. Any other questions?
I guess while we're on the topic of the plants, I wasn't aware of the type of stone that the mountain is made of. Does
Quartzite.
that give us something very different than maybe like the plants at Poston Park?
Yes. So the mountain is mostly chestnut oak on the rocky portions, which do like quartzite rocky areas. There's a lot of Virginia pine. That is because it was logged several times, and so that's what has come back. And then on the top of the mountain, I have heard that there is an American chestnut, just a young one that keeps resprouting and dying back off from the blight. And I think this was confirmed because the Forest Service is the ones who told me that it was there, and they have a fire tower up on the mountain. But since they have, they used to have someone actually living up on the mountain to help with the trespassing problem in the 80s. That's no longer there, and since they have moved off, kudzu has covered the area where the chestnut was. So I don't know if it is still alive or not. But the Catawba Lands Conservancy is working to control invasives at the top, so maybe we'll uncover that chestnut. Yes.
Is the fire tower still being used at all?
They like to say they use it.
No, it is not. It is not. The stairs are all rotted going up to it. They couldn't get up there safely if they tried.
They fixed it. They did, because we said, you're not using this, look at these steps. And they were like, we'll fix them. They say they use it. They say, but it's more of like a precautionary thing. It's like if we ever have an out of control wildfire in Gaston County, the purpose of those towers is to be able to watch fire behavior from the top and kind of see where it's going. Which the reason why I say they use it is because I'm like, okay, they also have helicopters for that now, which is what they've used. So I don't see a use of it, but it was rotted and everything, they weren't using it all, and then when we pointed that out, we're like, maybe we could take this down. They were like, we'll fix it. So they repaired the steps and they added a fence around it as well. So, yeah.
On that, and I probably already know the answer, I know in several locations around the state, there are fire towers where it's legal to climb. There's
Right.
actually a club where if you climb all of them, you get a badge.
Yeah, that's cool.
Any plans we work with NC?
I think that's kind of what we were angling for, because those are ones that the Forest Service has donated.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of like, hey, y'all want to use this one, right? Like, that could be cool. But they said, nah. So we'll see, maybe. Maybe they'll give it to us in the future. Yeah, because that would be a great view. Because it would be the tallest spot that you could actually get to. So, any other questions? Awesome. All right, thank you all so much. You're a fantastic audience.
Well, thank you all for coming. I think you all agree. Quite an interesting program. Our next program will be on April 28th, and it'll be an interesting program about Abraham Lincoln's body. His body. There was a Chicago counterfeiting group that attempted to steal his body and ransom it back to the federal government. Should be a very interesting program. So that's April 28th, same time, same place.
Can I bring up one thing?
Yes.
Just plug you. If you go on YouTube to the Gaston County history, she has a series of 3 videos on Spencer Mountain, and that's the first place I heard of her about 5 years ago.
Yeah, during the
They're actually
pandemic.
very good. They're on YouTube.
They're really quite interesting
They're
programs.
actually very good, and she goes over a lot of the stuff she went today, but she actually takes you out there in videos. She gets a guy who's pretty good at geology, and he kind of just explains some of the rocks and trees. They're very good, about 10 minutes long each, very good.
Just
Very
like
good.
Erin's name on YouTube?
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I'm
what
blushing so hard because this was during the pandemic. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just
They're
like,
very good.
all right, I'm going to try and educate with a video. So, anyway, thank you.
It's through the Gaston County, what?
Gaston County, it's Gaston County who put it up. It was through Gaston County's YouTube.
And if you just search Spencer Mountain history on YouTube,
Yeah.
There's not that many videos.
it's like 3 videos, they're maybe 10 minutes, but they're very good. They're very well done.
Thank you.
My favorite one is the one that you did in your kitchen.
Yeah, with the creating
Yeah, and there's probably still flowers there, honestly. That didn't work the way I thought it was going to.
And if any of you folks are not on our mailing list, you know, if you would send your contact information to our email, which is Mount Holly NC Historical Society.org. Excuse me, not .org, it's at gmail.com. Getting it confused with the website. We'll be glad to add you to it, and you'll get notifications like this for all of our upcoming programs and any other significant things that are going on. And thank you once again for coming.
Thank you.